An ordinary day, an ordinary person. A secret that nobody saw coming. What investigators discovered would shock an entire nation. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why this case is still remembered today. Let's begin. Before we begin, remember that every case you see on this channel is based on real events that changed real lives forever. Some stories reveal shocking crimes, others expose dark secrets that remained hidden for years. But every investigation raises one question: what really happened? In today's case, the truth is far more disturbing than the headlines ever revealed. As the story unfolds, you'll discover evidence, unexpected twists, and the moments that changed everything. So stay with me until the very end, because the final revelation often changes the way you'll see the entire case. This is Dark Case Diaries.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're looking at a case that perfectly shows how modern science is completely rewriting the history of cold cases. I want you to picture this. It's August 2022. We're in a peaceful, sunny driveway over in Hawaii. Out of nowhere, California detectives roll up and completely surround an elderly Air Force veteran. It is a shocking, chaotic scene. Today we're going to break down the anatomy of a 40-year-old secret and look at exactly how this decades-long mystery was finally solved.
So, when detectives slap the cuffs on him, this elderly grandfather, a man named Gary Ramirez, acts just utterly confused. I mean, he's frail, he's literally leaning on a crutch, and he's mumbling, "What did I do? I don't know what I did." Kind of old, it's from California. Honestly, if you were just a bystander watching this happen, you would absolutely think the police were making a massive mistake. He just looks completely harmless.
And, well, that leads us to the central question of our explainer today. How exactly did this 75-year-old grandfather end up arrested for a horrific 40-year-old murder? How on earth does someone hide in plain sight, living a full, completely free life for 4 decades, all while harboring this monstrous secret? To understand how we got to that Hawaiian driveway, we have to go back to the very beginning.
Section 1. A Father's Worst Nightmare, 1982. We're transporting back to September of 1982 in Sunnyvale, California. A totally different era, right? Way before smartphones and doorbell cameras on every house. This is the story of 15-year-old Karen Stitt. The timeline of this tragedy starts around 8 p.m. Karen takes a bus down to Sunnyvale to meet her boyfriend. They go grab some drinks, walk by a mini golf course. It's just a normal, fun teenage evening. Then, around 11:45 p.m., her boyfriend leaves her at a bus stop so he doesn't miss his own curfew. By the next day, September 3rd, her father, Robert, realizes she never made it home. He frantically reports her missing. And then, tragically, later that exact same day, police make a grim discovery: a body located near a cinder block wall. Her frantic father received the absolute worst news imaginable over the phone.
And the sheer brutality of what happened that night, it's captured in a single number: 59. That is the number of times 15-year-old Karen Stitt was stabbed. Just horrific. But the brutality didn't even end there. She was actually bound by her own clothing, and her limbs were broken during what was clearly a desperate, violent struggle. This wasn't just a murder, it was a vicious, deeply personal attack that completely shattered the local community.
Section 2. The Wrong Suspect.
Okay, let's dive into this conflicting evidence. Because with a crime this brutal, you can imagine the police were under immense, intense pressure to find the killer. And this is a textbook example of how early investigations can get entirely derailed. The police had pretty good reasons to look at Karen's 17-year-old boyfriend, David, for the crime. Think about it. He was the last person to see her alive. An eyewitness placed him in a nearby 7-Eleven, and he actually failed a polygraph test where his answers showed signs of deception. But here's the reality. There was absolutely zero DNA match to David. And despite facing intense pressure from the cops, he maintained his innocence for decades. The circumstantial evidence pointed one way, but the hard science, it just refused to cooperate.
This all culminated in a super intense interrogation back in 2001. The detective basically cornered him and said, "The machine is a lie, you lie. I have other evidence, I have DNA." Now the police were flat out bluffing here. They told David his DNA was at the scene, hoping to force a confession. It's a pretty common interrogation tactic, actually. But David didn't break. Why? Because he truly didn't do it. Despite all their suspicions, the police simply lacked the actual, hard proof required to make an arrest.
So the really crucial takeaway here is that without a confession and without a DNA match, the investigation just stalled out. And it stalled for an agonizing 40 years. 4 decades. That is an absolute lifetime of waiting, hoping, and grieving for Karen's family. The case went entirely cold, leaving this dark shadow over the community and leaving a heartbroken father without any real answers.
Section 3. A decades-late DNA breakthrough.
But, as we know, science never stops advancing. Thanks to a monumental leap in DNA technology, that unidentified male DNA profile, which had been carefully preserved from the bloodstains on the wall all the way back in 1982, was finally put through modern genetic tracing. And this leap, it was a total game changer. It not only cleared David's name once and for all, but it opened up a brand new door. A vital tip led the Sunnyvale detectives straight to a specific family tree, specifically to 4 brothers with the last name Ramirez.
And the science was absolute. There was no guesswork anymore. By comparing the crime scene DNA to the DNA of a Ramirez relative, they narrowed it right down. It wasn't just any brother. The genetic match exclusively linked back to Gary Jean Ramirez. Now, back in 1982, Gary was 35 years old, and guess what? He just so happened to be visiting family in Palo Alto at the time, a mere 15 miles away from where Karen was murdered in Sunnyvale. The science unequivocally pointed directly at him.
Section 4. The interrogation room.
So now, we're back in August 2022. Gary Ramirez is sitting in the interrogation room, and what follows is this fascinating, high-stakes psychological chess match between a seasoned detective and a man who has kept a very dark secret for 40 years. Now, what's really interesting about these interrogation tactics is the structure. The detective doesn't just walk in and scream, "You're a murderer," right? He's methodical. First, he clearly establishes Miranda rights. Then, he gently probes Gary's ties to the Sunnyvale area, basically letting Gary box himself into a corner by claiming he had zero reason to be there. Only after that does the detective drop the hammer and reveal that he has indisputable physical evidence, and all the while he's closely observing Gary's physiological and verbal reactions.
And those reactions are incredibly telling. When the detective finally slides a photograph of 15-year-old Karen Stitt across the table, Gary looks at it and says, "Is that a guy or a girl? I don't recognize." Now, for someone accused of murder, this is an incredibly weak denial. As experts will point out, a natural response from an innocent person is usually a very direct, forceful statement. Something like, "I did not kill this girl." But Gary, he deflects. He plays dumb.
And then we get to this absolutely critical behavioral cue. The detective leans in and asks, "Are you curious how she was killed?" Up until this exact moment, Gary hadn't asked a single question about how the victim died. Think about that. Innocent people usually want to know the details of the crime they're being falsely accused of, right? Gary doesn't ask. He doesn't ask until the detective explicitly offers up the horrific details. "You stabbed her 60 times, Gary." Only then does Gary weakly say, "Oh my God, no, I didn't do anything like that." He asks for a lawyer pretty shortly after, but the damage to his whole facade was completely done.
Section 5. Justice delayed. The interrogation was over, the DNA was a perfect match, and this 40-year-old puzzle was finally complete. The wheels of justice began to turn. After being arrested in August 2022, the case wound its way through the courts until February 24, 2025. Facing an absolute mountain of indisputable genetic evidence, 78-year-old Gary Ramirez pled no contest and was officially convicted of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. He will be first eligible for parole in the year 2038. I want to put that into perspective for a second. Gary Ramirez will be 90 years old before he even has a chance at parole. For 40 decades, he got to enjoy the freedom of the Hawaiian sunshine. He lived a full life, a life completely undeserved, while Karen's life was violently cut short when she was just 15. But now, the reality is that he will almost certainly spend his final days exactly where he belongs, locked in a prison cell.
But you know, there's a deeply heartbreaking, bittersweet truth to this victory. By the time Gary Ramirez was finally identified and put in handcuffs, Karen Stitt's immediate family, including her frantic, heartbroken father who made that very first missing persons call, had already passed away. They went to their graves without ever seeing her murderer brought to justice, without ever truly knowing what happened that terrible night.
Which leaves us with a final, really provocative question. Can delayed justice ever truly heal the wounds of a 40-year cold case? On one hand, we have this incredible science that can literally reach back through time to catch a killer, and that brings a profound sense of closure to society. But for the family who actually lived the nightmare, time just ran out. It really makes you wonder about the balance between the incredible triumph of modern science and the irreversible toll of time. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this explainer today, and I hope it leaves you with a lot to think about. See you next time.
Every true crime case leaves behind more questions than answers. Behind every headline are real people, Real families and lives forever changed. If you found this investigation informative, consider subscribing so you never miss another carefully researched true crime story. I'd also like to hear your thoughts on today's case. Share your opinion respectfully in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, take care, and I'll see you in the next investigation.